Schaefer here, uh, local real estate agent, Tampa Bay. In case we've never met, pleasure to meet you. Just giving you guys some information here on Airbnbs. We go way back with Airbnb. We started them in 2018, and before that, my mother-in-law did them probably 15 years prior to Airbnb even existing. So we have a lot of time and experience with Airbnbs. And I just wanted to go over some very important topics when if you decide you want to buy an Airbnb and you want to get into this field. And I just want to give you some data on what's going on around our area and some updates on insurance, markets, and some other options in case you decide that you don't want to do an Airbnb. So without further ado, here we go. The so we had an Airbnb up in Tarpon Springs, around the area that we've completely converted now into yearly rentals, and we're not doing them a traditional way where the it's a vacant property, we move in a tenant, they sign a 1 year lease. We're not doing that. What we're doing is we left the Airbnbs the way they are. They are completely furnished, and they we're offering it to nurses, medical practitioners, anybody that's professional that's going to be in the area, but they're not going to be here for a long period of time. They're going to be on a contract basis of sorts, and we're offering them a completely furnished house with us covering the cable and us covering the internet bill, and they will have to cover the electric bill and their own water bill. So that's the way we're structuring it, and so far it's been pretty successful. But the main reason and that we shut down Airbnb was because of insurance. Now you can get insurance when you buy a property. The policy you're going to get up front is going to be a residential policy. Whether it's a second home or you're buying it for your first home, whatever the case is, you're getting a full-on residential policy. That policy is designed to cover you as the owner living there or coming there for periods of time or whatever it is, but there is no literature in there that will cover that property for a tenant of any sort. Even if you decided that you wanted to rent it out yearly, you have to switch over that insurance policy to something that covers the tenant. It's a tenant yearly policy that they have. An Airbnb policy is a completely different story. If you want to get proper insurance on an Airbnb, then you have to get a commercial policy. And a commercial policy has anywhere from about $500,000 up to about $1.5 million in liability coverage. They cover wind and extreme damages to the home, just like a residential policy would. The difference is that they're a lot more expensive. They have certain specifications that are in there as well that are you know, that are based on liability and other things that factor into the anything that could happen to the property that are not in residential policies, and they just are a completely different ball game. Uh, Last year in 2022 and in 2021, we had policies that ran about $5,500 per property. Well, 2023, when your policy expires, we found out that now those same exact policies, are around $10,000 per year, and we had some quotes that went up to about $15,000 per year. So it got super expensive. A whole bunch of the Airbnb policy covers, they left the state, they're not here. So insurance is a big mess. It's a big mess in residential, but it's a huge mess in commercial, and it's super duper expensive. So we decided to convert everything over. Now the I know Airbnb offers their liability coverage, and you can take them for their word on it. I've never had to claim anything with them, but I have heard of people that have had to go through their liability coverage policy, and didn't hear good stories about the way that they handle things and the way that they do their coverage for that if there's damage to the property or somebody gets injured or something to that effect. But I can tell you that when you keep and most of my clients do this, okay? I've told them this, and some of them just ignore it completely, but they do know that if you keep a residential policy on an Airbnb or a yearly rental, anything of that sort, and you have just use this as a scenario. You have a tenant that lives there, and they barbecue outside, and maybe they left the cover off or whatever, but just something happens and the house catches fire. What will happen in that situation is you'll put an insurance claim in, and they're going to send an adjuster out. The adjuster's job is to validate the damages, check on your on your policy and your deductible and blah blah blah, and see if there's enough extensive damage to go beyond your deductible, which is that is a whole nother topic we can cover another day. But the thing is that another thing that they do is they do a deep dive into that property. They're looking for any way out of that policy that they can get. So they're looking to see if they can find out if you are renting that property out. So they're going to look on Airbnb, they're going to look on VRBO, they're going to go to all these websites and see if they can find your property. And they want to know who is living there and how long and everything. So if they find out that you had a tenant living at the property, then they can get out of covering your property because of that. And I've seen it happen. Uh, I've seen this exact case happen down in Largo, where the tenant was barbecuing, and they left the fire going too long. It caught fire, burned the soffits, burned the entire attic area, and started coming down into the house before they were able to put it out. But that happened, and it rained, it got all wet, it was totally destroyed, almost a total demo home, and there was no coverage on it because they had a renter there. So you take a huge risk when you decide to get an Airbnb, but do not get it insured properly. It's a risk that we are not willing to take, and we never advise anyone to take. But to each his own. So that was the main biggest reason that we decided to get out of it. The other thing is that when you buy an Airbnb, you have to consider that if you're basing your cash flow on the Airbnb, then you're making an error. Number one, you can just say for instance this one here, $565 per night, and you look on Airbnb and you're gonna buy something here in Bel Air, okay? So you go, oh look, I can $565. This one probably has a pool, but if I don't have a pool, I can get $338 or $399 per night. And you kind of get a rough idea of what people are showing on this website that they're going to get per night. The problem is that if you look in, let's just check this one out here. This one has a pool. If you look in this and you pull up their calendar, look, this is all, we can go back too. So I just did a date way out just to see. So we're in August. So okay, so if you think that that house is going to rent for $380 a night, look at all the opening dates they have. They have no bookings in September. They have the rest of August open. No bookings in October. No, look, they have 1 week in November. And Christmas and New Year's basically in December. Nothing in January. February. This is blocked out because, let's see, nope. Okay, so they do have half the month available in February and some in March. I'm sorry, but that is not, this Airbnb is priced too high. And that's why you see this price drop, $375 to $338. It's way too high, but the other issue is that if you just hypothetically say that you saw this online and you didn't know to look into this calendar and you didn't research this area enough, and you said, okay, I can probably get anywhere between $300 and $338 per night, it's not going to happen. So if you base your income and your expected cash flow on this Airbnb, you're going to be in for a huge awakening whenever those mortgage payments start to come in, but the bookings are extremely slow. You're going to see that you're not going to be able to cover yourself. So what you have to do if you decide that you want to do an Airbnb, you got to look at it as, first of all, when you buy a home, you need to get insurance quotes, proper insurance quotes, so you can see where you're really at. Number one. Number two, you got to consider taxes, and I can go over this in a whole nother video, but the taxes if you bought a house right now in August, your taxes are not going to be the same in January. They're going to go up because the market's gone up since 2020, 40%. So there's going to be a roughly 40% increase in taxes. So if you're spending $2,000, or you buy a house and they structure your mortgage based on your payments being at $2,000 a year, in January you're going to be paying closer to $4,000 a year. So your taxes are going to almost double, and that's going to happen across the board on any home you buy right now. That's what's going to happen. So you got to make sure that you have the correct insurance and what is that going to cost you, and then B, revise your taxes, add that to your mortgage payment, and see where your real payments are going to be if you do everything by the book correctly. Where is it at? And then the next thing you have to do is you have to take the property and you have to find out what it'll rent for on a yearly basis. And you have to see that if you rent your house on a yearly basis, you get yearly rental insurance, and you revise the new taxes. If you can break even on that property and not lose money, that is your fallback contingency. And then you can look at Airbnb as a bonus. You can say, okay, I know that I can rent my property out for sure on a yearly basis, but I'm going to give Airbnb a try and see if it works out. And if it does, then great. But if it doesn't, I can fall back and I can rent my property out per year. Right now, you're going to find that hard to find because prices are high, interest rates are high and going higher, and the math will not make sense. You'll see that it's way too much money per month versus what you can rent it out per month on a yearly basis in most cases. That's what you're going to find. If you use that as some criteria, it'll really protect you from buying something, not having any experience in Airbnb, and then finding out the hard way that A, you can't get the money you want on Airbnb, B, you spend a whole bunch of money trying to furnish the Airbnb and get the thing rolling for electricity. You probably did some upgrades on it, all that money spent, and you can't get any money or you can't cover any of your bills on it. So you have to switch tactics in the middle of it while you're negative cash flowing, and then you have a big serious problem on your hand. At least you know if you protect yourself by running the yearly figures, you'll know that at the worst case scenario, you can rent it out per year and break even. That is an absolute must, in my opinion. And then, I wanted to go over some areas. So if you do decide that you want to buy an Airbnb or that's something you want to plan for, then you got to know these areas, okay? Tampa Bay, these areas, Apollo Beach, Riverview, Bloomingdale, Bradenton, some of Thonotosassa, Citrus Park, Odessa, Lutz, this whole entire Tampa Bay area. St. Petersburg, Largo does not fall into this, but Clearwater, Safety Harbor, Oldsmar, Dunedin, Palm Harbor, Tarpon Springs. So most of this area that people want to travel to, that's the tight Tampa Bay area, where the beaches are, where the activities happening. These have built-in zoning restrictions, and what that means is that the city municipalities, they defined a residential home and they put a definition on it, and they specified this a long time ago that a residential home is defined as a home that someone lives in for X amount of weeks, and most of these have 4 to 6 weeks in that definition. So what they're doing is they're saying you cannot have an Airbnb here because we have zoning restrictions that were built in prior to Airbnb even existing. So they're saying that if you do decide you want to rent the house out, you have to rent it out for a minimum of 4 weeks or 6 weeks or whatever it is. So if you decide that you want to get an Airbnb in some of these areas, then what happens is that you go on Airbnb, get everything set up, you try to rent it out per day, and then you get a nosy neighbor who doesn't like it, and they narc on you to the city municipalities, and those city municipalities come out and tell you that they know you're renting it out for daily rentals or weekly rentals or whatever, but they have to enforce the fact that it's a minimum of 4 weeks, and if they catch you doing it, they're going to fine you. I don't know everyone's fine, but the ones that we've received in the past were about $500 per day. So not that you can't do it, it's just that you take on a risk of getting narked on. One area that you can do it in is Largo, because they lost a lawsuit and they don't have anything in their zoning restrictions. So it's going to be a case by case basis, but I can tell you that most everywhere in Tampa Bay and Pinellas County they have restrictions on it, and you can't do it. We did it in these areas, and we did it successfully, but there's ways to do that, and it involves not putting pictures of the front of the house on Airbnb. You know, you have to change the location of the property around so that you can't get narked on. So it's a pain in the butt to do, and you know, if you get one bad neighbor, it's almost impossible that you can hide it. You can hide it for a little bit, but eventually they're going to bust you, and you're going to have to do something else and revert it to something different. So just be aware of that these areas are restricted, and you got to be real careful. Uh, Areas that aren't restricted, basically Pasco County, which once you cross Tarpon Springs right here, you get into Pasco County, Newport Richey, Holiday, Port Richey, Odessa, Trinity. I'm sorry, not Odessa, Trinity, Land Lakes, and then up here into Hernando County, you got Hernando Beach, Weeki Wachee, Spring Hill, even Brooksville. So these areas are not the most. These are not going to be as lucrative as Tampa, but you can do them here. They do charge you a vacation tax, but they are allowed in these areas, so you don't run the risk of getting shut down. Now, if you cannot do this in an HOA, it's very risky to even consider it. Most of them won't let you do it, and if you try to buy a condo or something to that effect in an HOA, I would never recommend it because they might allow you now, but next year they might tell you can't do it, and then you know what do you do then? So that's just a risk that is out there. So that is the pretty much the rundown I wanted to show you guys. But another quick reason why we decided to pull out, I'll just give you an example of the one we had in Tarpon Springs. So this is, you know, these dates are way out. So a lot of these, this is me trying to potentially book a place in March. If I were to put this in, you know, the first week of December or something, there'd probably be more of these on here. But this is just an example of what I'm talking about here. But when we first started Airbnb in Tarpon Springs, there was probably 3 or 4 listings at the most, you know, in these areas, and we're not even zoomed all the way in. So you can see, you know, just look right here. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. There's 7 right here. 8, 9, 10, 11. This is 11 right down the downtown area. When we started, there was a 1 or 2 here, and maybe 3 or 4 in the whole area. But what I'm getting at is that Airbnb has taken off, and it's super saturated right now. So someone who looks on Airbnb, they have their choice of where they want to stay. I mean, they can go anywhere. And these places, like if you're looking right here, and you just are concerned about price, I mean, why would you pay 215 or 222 when you could pay 123 or 90 or 135? I mean, it's just options are it's too saturated. There's too much supply of Airbnbs and not enough demand with the travelers right now, and that has set things off. We started to decline to reduce prices for just to get more traffic coming in. But when you reduce prices and you pay cleaning fees and the fees to Airbnb, you notice that the profit margins aren't worth all the trouble, and that's why is one of the other big reasons why we decided to convert over. So definitely check that before you ever buy or consider an Airbnb. You got to make sure that you have a uniqueness to the property. You're in a unique area that has access to a lot of cool amenities around the area. And then you got to make sure that you're not going to get out competed to death because there's 10 other people trying to do the same thing you're doing. So the it's just a matter of choice if you guys want to do this or not. Uh, I if you decide that you don't want to do this, you can always put a furnished property that you try to rent out on a yearly basis or 6 months, whatever the case is, on Airbnb. You can also put on Zillow. You can put it on nursing websites, VRBO, any of these websites. But if you do it, in my opinion, it was better to do a furnished home to a contractor in our local area that's going to be here for a year, because the insurance is different when you go from, you can do a residential rental that is substantially less money than you can if you do anything less than a year, then you're going to be into a commercial vacation policy of some sort. So this video is a little longer than I expected, but there's a lot of data I wanted to give you guys because I know it's such a big thing with Airbnb, but I also run into clients that make big mistakes on this stuff, and it's just such a blow whenever things don't work out. And it's usually I meet clients when they're trying to sell their property because it's too late and they already made the mistake. So I'm wanted to give you guys a little bit of tidbit info because we have direct experience with this, and just let you know what we think about it. So, anyways, if there's anything we can do for you, if you have any questions anytime, please reach out. And I will be back next Friday with a new video. I don't know what it's going to be yet. I'm thinking that maybe next week we'll talk about maybe flood insurance, which is a total disaster, or some other topics in regards to insurance because it seems to be a big problem. So, anyways, thank you for your time, and I will talk to you soon. Take care.